Teach them the 7 laws of Noah, which are found in the first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis. The snake story, ye shall not surely die, was blasphemy. Ye shall be as gods, idolatry. Any attempt to humanize God or deify man is idolatry. To pray to a man or through a man is idolatry. The third law is against theft, and Eve took the fruit. The fourth law is against murder, Cain and Abel. The fifth law is against illicit sex. The sons of daughters seeing the daughters of men. The sixth law is to establish courts of justice. The earth was filled with murder and violence, evil, wickedness and violence, because there was no judicial system. God had protected Cain from anybody punishing him. That didn't work. So we see the result is the earth was filled with wickedness and violence. The sixth, the seventh law, of course, is against eating blood or the limb of a living animal. There is a kashrut for B'nai Noah. My concluding remark is this. Let's keep talking about it. But if you're not doing it, let's start doing it. It's not the responsibility of the rabbis to do all this, but the rabbis are responsible to teach their parishioners, to teach their congregants, men and women, to teach the 7 laws of Noah and to teach people Torah. And until we get it in action, we have built the whole structure from the Atzilut to the Bri'ah to the Yitzirah, and now let's make it Sot. Get out and do it.
Eventually make Aliyah. So to all the critics who say, oh, here's my Teudat Zehut. You can see, I'll try my best to, you can see cover some stuff, but there's my picture there. You can see, and I'll show it a little bit from a distance, covering up some of the stuff, but just a quick glance so people know, hey, this is legitimate. I'm not making things up. And so I spent some time in Israel, studying and doing coursework there at some of the universities, Hebrew University, Ben Gurion University, and also studying at different shiurim and yeshivot there to gain more studies, because I was interested in becoming a rabbi. And that's where I learned a lot more of this mystical, Kabbalistic, Hasidic, Chabadnik type of Judaism. Not that I ever was a Chabadnik, I was considered still modern Orthodox, but you get access to all of these different movements and shakers in Israel. And so that's what led me into further Talmudic study.
But I'm sorry, you are a rabbi, right? You were.
Yes, in fact, yes. I'll show quickly for all the critics. Here's my degree from the University of Judaism. You can call them, you can ask them. It's in Los Angeles. And here is the smicha that I got from a rabbi in New York. But I am familiar with these texts. And it's very interesting to see the scholars that you have interviewed and debated with, and to wonder what's going on. Why do they not see what I obviously seen and been taught, And so I'm hoping we can at least scratch the surface tonight.
We'll start to speak about Noahide laws, and then we will go into more details of sub-laws. Presidents have been signing Noahide laws since Carter for a very long time, every single year, with 10 rabbis around our United States president, declaring Education Day USA on Schneerson's birthday every year, and saying that foundations of the United States are based on Noahide laws. Okay, and that these are the foundations that our nation has to return to.
The Senate will come to order. Today's opening prayer will be offered by guest chaplain Rabbi Shea Harlick of Chabad of Southern Nevada.
Almighty God, members of this prestigious body, the United States Senate, convene here in the spirit of one of the 7 Noahide laws, which was set forth by you as an eternal universal code of ethics for all mankind, that every society be governed by just laws.
StopNoahide.blogspot.com, hashtag StopNoahide Okay, so this video is about the fact that U.S. Congress has been opened 4 times under the auspices of Jewish Noahide law. It was opened with Noahide prayers. So this one has a little bit of information in it. So I'm going to read my description straight from the blog, and then I want to read one of the prayers which I have in writing. So on June 25th, 2009, the U.S. Congress was opened with a prayer statedly under the auspices of the Noahide laws by Rabbi Shea Harlig. The rabbi correctly states that the Noahide laws were set forth by Congress as in 1991, Public Law 102-14 was passed, which states that the Noahide laws are the foundation of the American civilization, and that it is our responsibility to educate the nation about these laws, and that our president will sign an international scroll with other heads of state in order to return the world to the 7 Noahide laws. Now remember, there's 6 other laws which also state this. There's 7 laws in America recognizing the Noahide laws. But when Rabbi Shea Harlig opened up the Congress with prayer, he said, well, we're opening up this prayer because you, Congress, have recognized that the Noahide laws are the foundation of America. He mentions that in his prayer. I have that on video, so you have to go to the website to see it. The rabbi says the Congress is assembled under the law of justice. The 7th Noahide law commands non-Jews to set up courts of justice in order to administer the death penalty for anyone committing idolatry, including Christianity, blasphemy against the Jewish law, praising Jesus as God is blasphemy, or encouraging homosexuality or adultery. It's very important that he says this is under the law of justice setting up courts, executing people. He's going into our legal body and calling it a Noahide body. This is a Noahide Congress operating under the Noahide laws. So you can see that he's inserting deadly consequences into our governmental system with his prayers. The Congress was again opened under the auspices of the Noahide law in July 2010 by Rabbi Gershon Avtzon, A-V-T-Z-O-N, and in 2016 by Rabbi Yosef Greenberg. Both rabbis praying in the same name. Both rabbis prayed in the name of the founder of the modern Noahide movement, Rabbi Schneerson, who said that non-Jews have satanic souls and are spiritually inferior and are indeed the property of Jews who are the meaning of creation. Now, the final prayer, the Noahide laws, were also referenced in Rabbi Moshe Feller's prayer before Congress in 1994. So actually, this last prayer was the first prayer, and it was in 1994. And I want to read it because he actually mentions all 7 Noahide laws. So this is what Rabbi Moshe Feller, this is what his prayer stated. Almighty God, the members of this august body, the U.S. House of Representatives, convene here to fulfill one of the 7 biblical commandments which you issued to all mankind, that all societies must be governed by just laws. So again, he's bringing up the 7th Noahide law, setting up courts of justice. This is a Noahide body, the Congress, which obviously, eventually, if they had their way, would sign into legislation execution laws. We've talked about how they're trying to bring decapitation, Noahide decapitation laws to the Supreme Court. They're trying to influence them. So we can see this continuation of Noahidizing our Congress under the 7th law of the Noahide laws. So he continues, at the dawn of civilization as related in Genesis and its sacred commentaries, God issued 7 commandments which came to be known as the 7 Noahide laws. And he lists all of them in his prayer before Congress. Now, Congress heard this. To worship you alone and not to serve idols. Why did Congress allow this man to come in and give this prayer to worship you alone. So he's talking about the Jewish God. So we're only allowed to worship the Jewish God alone. Well, what about polytheists? What about atheists that don't want to? What about someone who says, well, my God is not the same as the Jewish God? When the rabbi says God, he's not talking about my God. What if a Muslim said that? They heard this. Do not worship idols. He said that in the middle of Congress. We have freedom of religion here in America. Never to blaspheme your holy name. Blasphemy comes under many different circumstances, or many different shapes and forms. I mean, it's not just cursing God, to question his existence, to question his movements, to question what has been written in the Talmud. This is all blasphemy. And the very word blasphemy, when did we have anti-blasphemy laws in this country? Didn't anyone in Congress hear this and take objection? Why didn't anyone report this? You know, why was this just accepted and just, you know, went over everyone's head? Nobody heard this. Nobody asked, what are these Noahide laws? Nobody asked, what does he mean about these 7 biblical commandments? Where is he going with this? He mentions it. The 7 Noahide laws. Nobody said, well, what is he talking about? I've never heard of these Noahide laws. Most people haven't. It doesn't come from the Bible. If you're a Christian, you've never heard of the 7 Noahide laws. If you're a Muslim, you've never heard of the 7 Noahide laws. So nobody stood up or even thought to write about this, bring this forward later. It's been done 4 times. So no murder. Again, nobody's going to go against that. Not to commit adultery, whether you believe in adultery or not, or whether you believe it is a sin. In this country, you're allowed to practice adultery. Again, there were no feminists in the Congress that heard this. There were no atheists in the Congress that heard this. There were no homosexuals in the Congress that heard this. Not to steal, not to be cruel to any living creature, and that every society governed by just laws which are based in the recognition of you, O God, as the sovereign ruler of all men and nations. So again, I mean, wouldn't atheists take objection to this, that every society must be governed with laws which are based in the recognition of you, of God? And again, it's their God, it's the Jewish God. What about Christian God? Christians who disagree with this, pagans, Hindus, Buddhists who say, well, your God is not my God. He continues, grant us, Almighty God, that those assembled here to enact the laws which govern this blessed country be cognizant of your presence and conduct their deliberations accordingly. Bless them with good health, wisdom, compassion, good cheer, and good fellowship. May they constantly realize that in laboring for the enactment of just laws, they are doing your will. Amen. So he's basically saying that you who are assembled here, we're praying that you make your laws in the image of the 7 Noahide laws. Okay, this happened 4 times. 4 times Noahidist rabbis were invited into Congress. 4 times they heard these declarations of the Noahide laws and nobody asked any questions. Why is that? Or if they did ask questions, these are people in Congress. Bill Dannenmeyer asked a question. I just reported on him in the last video, where in that Public Law 102-14 signed in 1991, it was signed by only 4 congressmen after everyone else was told to go home. He came forward and wrote a letter about it, but it never got anywhere. Okay, do you think that there were other Congress people that heard about these Noahide laws and these prayers and got upset and wrote letters and tried to inform people and it didn't get anywhere? You know, there's definitely something going on here. So it's important to know that our Congress is being subverted with the Noahide agenda, particularly with the 7th Noahide law of courts of justice, which call for beheading.
In order, the prayer will be offered by our guest chaplain, Rabbi Kershaw Afson from Cincinnati, Ohio.
Almighty God, Master of the universe, I invoke your blessing today on the members of this honorable institution, the House of Representatives of the United States of America. May they humbly serve their constituencies, aware that creating just legislation is one of the 7 laws that you, Almighty God, gave all humanity through Noah as detailed in Genesis.
In order to not have chaos, that without Noahide laws, the world will go into the chaos. And there are pastors who are definitely against Noahide laws. They think they're unconstitutional. Public Law 10214, they're unconstitutional. President has no right to do this, to keep signing, Education Day USA, which is so deceiving, because a lot of people think that Education Day USA is about education, that it has something to do with subjects and children and teachers. It has nothing to do with it. Everything about that day is about Schneerson, right? To honor and celebrate Schneerson as a person. And then his ideas that Noahide laws have to be disseminated among the Gentiles. That's what the Education Day USA is about. But people are not told. So it's done sneakingly and in a very deceptive, manipulated way.
In America, there was this challenge because of the separation of church and state, meaning that the government cannot, it's freedom of religion, and the government cannot impose any religion on any people. The American government had that issue between church and state, and they overcame it by saying it's education. The point is that they overcame it in America by having it promoted as education, and religious leaders have to come to the table and say, I've had imams here, I've had Buddhist sheikhs here, I've had rabbis, I've had Christian scholars from all over. Everyone has come, and everyone has come together on this issue, and saying that the Universal Noahide Code is 1,000% what their religion teaches. So I think it's just getting everyone to sit down around this table, and we'll have UN in the UN, which is Universal Noahide in the UN.
And we'll have UN in the UN, which is Universal Noahide in the UN.
You are 100% correct on everything you're saying, and in fact, I studied under rabbis, especially in Israel, that this was everyday news. So I just figured everyone knew, and so I've read the document that you're talking about when Congress passed that Education Day in the 94, 95, around that time.
Yes,
and
harder. It was.
I mean, just a plain reading of the English, right? I mean. Or at least the version I saw, I think it was updated or something in the 90s, but maybe originally going back to Carter.
To the late 70s is actually when they first did it with Carter.
Okay. Yeah, I stand corrected. But the point is, I've read whatever the version of it, either version, at least the one I read, just a plain reading in English tells you that it's about Schneerson.
Yes.
So I don't understand how you could read that as an American in plain English and before it, I don't even understand how that even comes into the Congress, into other than something going on nefariously behind the scenes.
Is it part of any kind of their futuristic prophecies? Are they preparing for it? Are they taking it seriously? Is this where we are heading? Or we are kind of like, or these are just innocent things being signed as something ceremonial and it has absolutely no value?
No, it has a lot of value, and it should be a wake-up call and a warning to Christians. And again, it's not just to create sensationalism or something. This is real. They really believe this, almost like this is Satan's version of what he's telling us he's going to do via Maimonides, via his Mishnah Torah. Mm-hmm. And so we'll present that. But yeah, in short, you have been absolutely right. I'm not crazy. I'm an educator by profession. I work in a school. I'm not nuts. I passed all the background checks. I'm not some crazy conspiracy guy in a basement. This is true. This is what was taught. And what I'm going to present is going to be a synopsis of what the end times looks like according to authentic rabbinic Talmudic Judaism.
Tell me if I'm correct. The problem with all of this is that it is not the Reformed Jews who have influence in governments. It is not the Karaite Jews that have influence in governments. It is the specific group of Jews that are embracing Talmud, they are embracing Noahide laws, and this is the problem, that governments are influenced with that specific group. It's almost like they are the head of a snake that got into governments, and somehow governments are giving them the power. Am I correct?
You're very much correct. Internationally, and you well know, I mean, you lived in Israel. Israel's a microcosm of what's about to happen internationally.
Are non-Jews obligated to keep the 7 Noahide laws? And if they are, how are they supposed to know that they're obligated to keep them? And how are they supposed to know what they are?
Well, the nations of the world, every person in the world has to keep the 7 Noahide laws.
Look at the Knesset, right? You can have the Likud, you can have the Labor Party, and as great and as influential they want to be, they never have a majority. They always need the minority party. So the irony in Israel is the religious minority are the most powerful. That's the method. That's where we're going to, and that's the plan. So if we're already seeing that in the modern state of Israel, anybody who's thinking that can never happen internationally has either got to be in denial, or they just, they're just ignorant, or they're in on it. You only have 3 options. And so, that's what I believe. The rabbi that is speaking is Rabbi Hillel Weiss. He's part of, if not the head, he's one of the major players in the new Nicene Sanhedrin.
Yes.
And he works side by side with Rabbi Israel Ariel, who is part of the Temple Institute, right, that are creating the garments and preparing, the altar that was dedicated back in Hanukkah 2 years ago, right, 2018.
That's right.
And so I'll share that clip. And then he's basically being asked in that clip, well, what are Christians going to do if they deny your Messiah? And he says, well, we'll see. And I guarantee we're about to see what that result's going to be. So let me share the screen.
Will be the judge. The Mashiach will be the judge. And
The Mashiach will be the judge.
not for what he sees and not for what he hears, but what he smells.
You believe the Mashiach ben David is coming to
Mashiach
this
ben
temple?
David is very soon, and he is a Jew, and he's not Jesus.
He's not Jesus.
And if the Christians want to hold it, they can hold it. But we will never change our mind. We prefer to go back to Auschwitz and not to change our religion. This is the main thing. We are loyal.
What would happen to Christians who refuse this Messiah and hold on to Jesus?
Then we will see. We will see. I don't know. I'm not the Messiah.
Indeed, we're about to see. And if you notice, he just lied to everyone that is watching this video. I'm not the Messiah. I don't know what will happen. I'm going to show you with their own text what they are planning to do and what the expectation is. Exposing the rabbis, rabbinic Judaism's Messianic era, a warning for Christians. So what I'm presenting is how the Messianic era, or the end times from Orthodox perspective, was presented to me. And so I'm summarizing it in the best way that I can without getting lost in the minutia of rabbinic literature. And so step 1 is establishing rabbinic authority by eliminating God's authority, okay? And we see this in the following citation. God submits to the rabbis, and the citation is Baba Metzia 59b. So in context, there's this story, right, in this piece of Talmud, where you have this rabbi by the name of Rabbi Eliezer, and God is on his side, and he does all these series of miracles to prove to his rabbi buddies, his friends, that God is on his side of the interpretation of halakha, of Jewish law, right? And the other guys are just not buying it, right? So sound familiar? Jesus doing all these miracles, believe in the work that I do, and what do the other guys say? Nope, we're not interested. We're not interested. And so this is the context of the story here. So I'll go ahead and read it. Rab Yehoshua stood on his feet and said, the Torah is not in heaven. Lo bashamayim hi. That's right. That's what's written here.
That's right.
And they're taking Deuteronomy 30:12. And what the rabbis do is classical eisegesis. They take a description, they make a doctrine out of it, and they read into it what they wanted to say.
Yes.
And so this is what they declare that Deuteronomy 30:12 means. What does the Torah is not in heaven mean? ? Rabbi Yirmiyah said that the Torah was already given at Sinai. We do not pay attention to the heavenly voice, since you already wrote at Sinai in Torah. So this is Rabbi is talking to what is called the Bat Kol, the voice of God, right? maybe it might even be Metatron, in their Zoharic interpretations later. But this voice of God, this representation of God, this rabbi has the audacity to talk to the creator of the world in this fashion, right? And he tells them, after the majority to incline, he debates God with the reference of Exodus 23:2. So again, out of whole cloth, they eisegete into this verse that the Torah is no longer in heaven, God, and you cannot tell us what to do with your Torah. And so Rabbi Natan met with the prophet Elisha and said to him, what did the Holy One, blessed be he, do in that hour? Just asking that question alone, you can tell that the disciples of these rabbis are raising their eyebrow. What? The previous rabbi said this to God? This is not possible. You can tell that just by the question they're asking. And the response to that question is, he said to him, he smiled and said, my sons have defeated me. My sons have defeated me. I remember I was sitting in my junior year of undergraduate school, and this section of Talmud came up for the first time. This is the first time that I saw it. And I wasn't saved. I was nowhere near saved, but I just knew inside after reading this section, something was not right. I could not imagine God submitting to human beings like this so easily. And the story ends abruptly right there, and they go on to something else about pots and clays and whatever they were debating previously and after in between this section, right? So this is the hallmark. This is the foundation. This is where the rabbis point back and say, here's our authority. God submitted to us. You listen to our voice, which leads me into the next section about their authority. Follow the rabbis over the Torah, Eruvin 21b. And so here, all these citations are coming from this website, Sepharia, right? Sepharia.org. It's an online by Jews for Jews. I am actually genuinely surprised that they even put these citations out there to be found. But that's a whole nother debate, right?
It's important to bring out. That's very important to bring out that Sepharia is by the Jewish people for Jewish people.
Exactly. This is not me making it up or Stephen or some conspiracy. This is the actual all rabbinic literature that is available that they have online. And so each of the verses are marked in red and orange so that they correspond to the Hebrew, right? And so this is what they say in the red, my son. So they're having this discussion with a disciple, the rabbis, right? And so they tell this disciple, this person they're talking to, my son, be careful to fulfill the words of the sages, even more than the words of the Torah. And then they go on to explain why. But the fact that that statement is there should raise a red flag. What do you mean? The word of a man is more important than the word of God? Wow. I mean, this stuff is not taught on a, Temple Bet on Sinai on a Saturday morning, right? You're not going to get this at a Shabbat Shalom candle lighting. This is stuff that's only discussed behind the scenes.
Yeah, this is taught in their synagogues. That's where they teach these things.
In the Beit Midrash, right? In the yeshivot, right? And so we continue on in the orange, and they continue to say, whereas with respect to the words of the sages, anyone who transgresses the words of the sages is liable to receive the death penalty. Kol, there's your key word. Kol, everyone, not just Jews. Kol, everyone. Kol ha'over al divrei sofrim hayav mita. So anybody who wants to say, oh, well, that's not what they meant, or that's what they wrote back then, this is what the religion teaches when you decide to go against the words of the scribes. So bye-bye conservative rabbis, bye-bye reform rabbis, bye-bye secular Chilonim, Israelis. They're gone. Your head's going to be on the chopping block like everyone else. Why? Because this is their authority. God submitted, therefore now they're the voice of God, which now leads us into phase or step number 2. Now that they have that authority, they can teach anything out of whole cloth. And this is where they come in with the dehumanization of the non-Jewish nations to establish this control over them. And again, we're talking future tense in the sense that this is their expectation at the time that their Messiah, our Antichrist, right, Not,
That's
well,
right.
not that he's ours, but in the sense that in our text, right?
It'll be presented. Exactly.
Yeah, this Messiah is the Antichrist we find in the New Testament. And so step 2 is dehumanization. Now that I have the ability to speak on behalf of God, I can teach and say whatever I want. And sure enough, they do. Non-Jews are not human. Bava Metzia 114b. And again, Sepharia, here it is. I'm not making these websites up. You're welcome to go and check them out. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, here's your famous Talmudic Kabbalistic rabbi. This is the one guy that leads you all into what you've discussed so eloquently and thoroughly, Hannah, over these years. And so Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai says the following: the graves of Gentiles do not render one impure, as it is stated, and you, my sheep, the sheep of my pasture, are men. So again, they take Ezekiel and they eisegete into something they want to say, because the discussion is, well, do we anoint these bodies or not, if they're Gentiles, if they're Jews? And so they go on to say, which teaches, this verse, Ezekiel 34 that they're quoting, says the following according to them. They teach that you, i.e. the Jewish people, are called man, but Gentiles are not called man. I don't understand how any scholar with any degree or any layman can look at this and tell me that's not what they meant. This is a fabrication. You're misinterpreting. Even if that were the case, how do you justify this sentence alone, much less the discussions that we've already seen so far? This is outrageous, right? Can you imagine if I took these words, went into the street, took out Rabbi Shimon, took out all the references to Israel and just read it, you are not human, you would never think. You would think Hitler said this, or Mao, or Pol Pot, or something, right? And this is the essence and the fruit of this man-made religion. And so there you go. Now you have this dehumanization of non-Jewish nations. This is why you have now in the Christian Zionist churches this worship, the semi-worship of the Jews, right? Why? Because they in the sense behind the scenes have almost MK Ultra these people, in the sense that you're lesser, you need us, we are the ones that will provide God to you. And that's the farce. You see this in Messianic Judaism with Yitzhak Shapira. You see Latin America, South America, Asia, they're worshiping this guy. You need me, you need rabbis, you need X, Y, and Z to survive. Why? It goes back to this, because these Gentiles are not human. And I'm not saying that. This is what they're saying.
Exactly.
That's their teaching.
It's the end of days. You're going to need the iron of Esav, which represents Edom, which is the West, Europe, and the Americas, to get intermixed with Ishmael, which is basically Arabs and Muslims. How in the world was this ever going to happen if not for this refugee crisis? At the end of days, you're going to have this intermixing between Esav, Edom, which is the West, and the East, which is the Muslims and the Arabs, making this through this influx into the world. And they're going to have children, you know, I don't want to say by the dozens, but they're going to have a far larger birth rate than the indigenous people there, and they're going to sort of conquer by number. And there are many different sources for this. One of them in Yehezkel, chapter 14, and many other sources as far as this is concerned, where it's mentioned very, very vividly what will happen to the Jews and what will happen to Yerushalayim and what will happen to the world at that time, where there will be many, many people killed. And so on and so forth. So the idea of having these refugees come into Europe, it's no longer a matter of whether it's right or wrong. It's just simply fulfillment of what it was meant to be all along. This is the fulfillment of the Chazal and the prophecies.
It's just simply fulfillment of what it was meant to be all along. This is the fulfillment of the Chazal and the prophecies.
This has to happen, and this is just another sign that we are nearing, the completion of this tikkun of the entire world.
Le Mashiach viendra que quand Edom, l'Europe, la chrétienté sera totalement tombée. Donc je vous pose la question, c'est une bonne nouvelle que l'islam envahisse l'Europe? C'est une excellente nouvelle, ça annonce la venue de Mashiach. Excellente nouvelle.
Vous allez le payer très cher, les Européens. Mais à un point, vous n'avez même pas notion de quoi on parle. Et vous n'aurez pas à fuir. Parce que tout le mal que vous avez fait à Israël, vous le paierez au centuple. Quand l'Italie disparaîtra, quand Édom, c'est pour ça que le QG de la chrétienté qui vient de Esav se trouve là-bas, quand cet endroit-là disparaîtra, et c'est ce que veut faire l'islam, il s'occupe. L'islam, c'est le balai d'Israël, sachez-le.
Dome becomes America. Why? Because America is a dome, after all.
When you said dehumanization of Gentiles, Gentile nations in general, this is extremely serious because they are the ones who are crying anti-Semitism. You cannot say one word wrong about them. You're immediately anti-Semite. If you expose their religion, if you disagree with their religion, if you say anything about state of Israel that you don't agree with, now the definition of anti-Semitism has changed so much that you really have to watch your language or what you even say and how you say it, right? But they seem to have freedom to publish anything they want and say that Gentiles are not in a category of humans. Now turn it around. Imagine that Gentiles would say that sentence, or Christians would publish a book where the book would say Jews are not humans. Can you imagine? Can you imagine?
It would be, you would have FBI agents at your door in 10 seconds, you know?
Yes, you would be immediately imprisoned for hate speech and all kinds of things, but they seem to have a freedom to publish these type of sentences about the Gentiles.
But today we're taking another historic action. In just a few moments, I'll sign an executive order to combat anti-Semitism. So this is a very powerful document that we're signing today, and it's been a very big story over the last number of days when they heard. As you know, they had almost universal support in Congress, and yet they didn't get it done. And this has gone on for years and years. They've almost had universal support, but there was always a roadblock. But this year there's no roadblock because I'm doing it myself. It's much easier.
I'm doing it myself. It's much easier.
So something is going on here, and people need to pay more attention to what's going on, that who is getting this power.
And it's all supernatural, Hannah. It's not something that is practically explained with psychology or logic. This is a spiritual battle. The reason why they're getting away with it is not, and again, it's not to defame Jews. I'm not talking about the little grandma that's sitting on Shabbat service. I'm talking about the guys that are high up there that know this stuff, talk about this stuff, who shared this stuff with me, with all of their other Talmidim, their students, and it's there. It's literally there, and this is what they believe. And for critics to say, oh, well, that's an isolated incident, that's Baba Metzia. Well, here we go. Here's a subcategory of the Talmud, Keritot, right? And they're discussing the same topic that is in the previous reference. Again, they say, but if one applies anointing oil to Gentiles, why is he exempt? Aren't they included in the meaning of the term person? So there you go. Look at that question. They're even questioning their own, message. Aren't they included? You would not ask that if you didn't have some kind of sense in your head, right? Yes. And then they give the response. Nonetheless, they say the Gemara explains, indeed they are not. So Gentiles are not a person. As it is written, and they repeat Ezekiel 34:31 again, right? From which it is derived that you, the Jewish people, are called Adam, but Gentiles are not called Adam. And it's literally right here. I mean, these are just two citations that, I didn't want to make this presentation as long as it is already. And so this is just, point after point, rabbi after rabbi, saying the same thing. And remember, they are the voice of God in this religion. So don't let them fool you where, oh, well, one rabbi says this and he has another opinion and all. That's all the psyop. That's all the smoke and screens.
That's all the psyop. That's all the smoke and screens.
This is word of God. We just saw this in the second presentation, right? And if you deny the words of the scribes, you deserve death. So for them to deny this, they're already going against their own religion. And so here are the citations. They're right there.
Esav, who in modern day terms is really basically, certainly one of them is America. And America is slowly turning, especially Trump, toward Israel.
Donald Trump says he's a huge supporter of Israel, and that his actions show it. As part of his first trip abroad as president, Trump broke with past protocol and became the first sitting U.S. leader to visit Jerusalem's Wailing Wall. The Old City site, the holiest for Jews, sits on disputed territory claimed by both Israel and the Palestinians. Previous U.S. presidents largely restricted official visits to West Jerusalem and the rest of Israel. In January, his vice president, Mike Pence, traveled there to deliver a rare speech before Israel's parliament. An evangelical Christian, Pence often delivers a prophetic version of Trump's message, both in the Holy Land and in the U.S. On the ground, he's reinforced by Trump's bankruptcy lawyer turned ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. He's a religiously observant American Jew who supports Israeli settlements in the West Bank and owns property in Jerusalem. Meanwhile, at the UN, Trump's envoy Nikki Haley has vocally and actively taken on Israel's foes.
What we witnessed here today in the Security Council is an insult. It won't be forgotten.
And back in Washington, Trump's Jewish daughter and son-in-law have become somewhat celebrities within the Jewish community. Trump's alliance with Israel's hawkish Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has managed to silence most of Trump's pro-Israel critics and convinced key Jewish American backers, like billionaire Sheldon Adelson, to get on the Trump train. Netanyahu and his supporters saw in Trump a golden opportunity, a rare moment in time to reshape the U.S.-Israel alliance.
We call it a key to the White House, and it's a key to our country and to our hearts.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I have said, and this is true, that you have the key to the hearts of the people of Israel.
Within minutes, they were outside to sign deals normalizing Israel's relations with the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, a development Netanyahu called a pivot of history.
There is this inextricable tie between culture, religion, ethnicity that most people don't fully understand. That is unique and, how can I say it, so strong with Jews worldwide. There is a, I mean, you know, I used to say early on when I was a kid, I'd say, when I was a young senator, I'd say, if I were a Jew, I'd be a Zionist. I am a Zionist. You don't have to be a Jew to be a Zionist.
The main task of the Israeli Prime Minister and whoever becomes President of the United States on November 3rd would be to bring back that bipartisanship and restore the traditional, historic relation between Israel and the United States, regardless of who is in the White House.
Last year, Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty over the occupied Golan Heights, having a settlement named for him in return. In January this year came the distillation of his policy on Israel-Palestine, the Trump plan envisioning Israeli annexation of 30% of the occupied West Bank.
Trump, what he's done is not only biased towards Israel, it's biased towards Israel's expansion. It's an absolute adoption of Israel's colonization, Israel's occupation. It's an adoption of the Israeli settler movement ideology, fully.
Which leads us into step number 3, the global domination by the rabbis, King Messiah. This would be the Antichrist, right, in our Bible, in the New Testament. And this King Messiah, this Moshiach ben David or ben Joseph, whoever they want to put in place, he will enforce their world system of law and capital punishment for breaking that law, aka this is where the Noahide laws come in, right? And so here are the citations. Non-Jews are beheaded. We see that in the New Testament, in the book of Revelations, right? These saints were beheaded for the faith that they had in Jesus Christ. So here's Maimonides, Mishneh Torah, one of the biggest rabbis. You well know Maimonides, Rambam, right? He's one of the biggest rabbis of apart from the Shulchan Aruch and Yosef Karo, everyone goes back to him, right?
Human Rashi.
Him, Rashi, right?
And Rashi, who comes from him as well. And so he wrote a book, The Kings and Their Wars, right? And so this is attributed to First Kings and stories that are in the Bible, but he's writing in the future sense. He's saying this king is the Messiah to come. And so this is in chapter 3. And he says, whosoever is found rebelling against the king, so that's the Antichrist, has forfeited his life. Is that not what the book of Revelation says? If you rebel against this Antichrist, is he going to embrace you? No, he's going to kill you. And the king has the power to sentence him to death at once. Even if the king should command an individual to proceed to a certain place, and he did not do so, or he was prohibited from leaving his house. Sound familiar, COVID-19, and you can't leave the house? They're getting us ready. And acted against it, he is guilty of death. So even if he just did not listen to a simple command, this king Messiah, this false Christ, has the right to kill you, right? And he goes on to say Joshua 1:18, again, eisegeting something into the text. But here's the crux of it. Likewise, whosoever despises or affronts him, he is empowered to doom to death at once, as the instance of Simei, the son of Gera, and he cites 1 Kings, right? But he, the king, right? He cannot sentence to any other death but being beheaded with the sword. So there you go. That's the confirmation that we see. How are these Christians, believers, going to be killed? Beheading by the sword. And Maimonides is telling you via Satan. I will say with a straight face, the one moving the hand of Maimonides to write this is obviously Satan, because we're dealing with the spiritual battle here.
Yes.
And then it goes on into chapter 6. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
What's interesting is that with what you're showing right there, Brother Perez, is that the United States just, I think, day before yesterday, has enacted the death penalty by federal death penalty now, and they've already carried out one execution. I think tonight they were going to carry out another one. Now they're doing lethal injection as of right now, but the point is it opened the door. And I happen to know during Obama's administration, I know this firsthand, that they ordered more than, 1 million blades for guillotines.
That they ordered more than, 1 million blades for guillotines.
And then they outsourced all the parts for the guillotines through Mexico, because they couldn't do it any other way legally. And I don't know how many guillotines we have, but I know firsthand that that was actually done. So now that the government has legalized the death penalty, federally now, which has not been done in I don't know how many years, they're making ready for the decapitation.
And there's Jewish lawyers in New York who are lobbying for the lethal injection being changed into decapitation.
Well, it's not a surprise. Here it is. We saw it in Revelations, which is the true word of God. And here you have Satan, the antithesis of Christ, telling you the same thing via his Jewish agents of the time, you know.
My administration will never tolerate the suppression, persecution, or silencing of the Jewish people. We have also taken a firm stand against the so-called divestment and sanctions movement, or BDS. You know that very well. And I have to tell you, Jared Kushner and Ivanka, they've been talking to me about this for 3 years now, maybe longer than that. But I go back about 3 years where it's something that I could do about it. You know, in this position, we can do things about it. Before that, not quite as much.
In this position, we can do things about it. Before that, not quite as much.
I'd be just like you. Successful, doing nicely, but not for this. But they've been talking from the beginning of the administration. They've been bringing this up. And we forcefully condemn this anti-Semitic campaign against the state of Israel and its citizens.
We forcefully condemn this anti-Semitic campaign against the state of Israel and its citizens.
These are agents of Satan, right? If you don't believe in Jesus Christ, you are what? Anti-Christ.
Yeah, exactly. And what I want to bring out in your presentation as you go, so I don't forget the point, is that when you mentioned how, and proved to them from the Talmudic text, how rabbis took the place of God, right? So the word antichrist actually means instead of Christ. It doesn't say against Christ, which of course it is against Christ, but the actual word is a replacement for Christ, or instead of Christ. That's the word meaning of antichrist. So they are a real, true epitome of the Antichrist religion. You can see that because they are taking the place that belongs only to Jesus, and they are taking that very place.
You have to learn the 7 law of Noah. You can Google it. You have it all over this website. We explained it.
No hide.
You have to be a good person.
Right.
You cannot hate anybody because of race, especially not the Jewish people, because they are the chosen people of God. He loves them very much. Hating them is considering hating God himself.
Hating them is considering hating God himself.
And look who's actually helping that to happen. You got people like Shapira.
Yeah.
There are other gatekeepers. I know that we've actually
Mark
spoke
Biltz,
about that.
I'm sorry to mention these names. We have been mentioning them before, but this is for the sake of people to wake up, because these people are making bridges with the Jews, telling Christians that Talmud is a good commentary on the Old Testament, valid commentary on the Old Testament, that we are supposed to listen to rabbis and go back to the Hebrew roots and make friends with Jews and never preach Jesus to them as not to offend them. So this is so important for Christians to really understand that it is not the Old Testament that they are believing. They actually, instead of Old Testament, they totally butchered the scriptures, and they actually teach Torah. I mean the Talmud, Zohar, Kabbalah, and other writings of the sages, and they are changing the Old Testament, right?
Well, yes, you saw the evidence there. Taking verses and eisegeting, meaning that's a fancy word for reading things into something you wanted to say, right? And that's evident. If people can't see that, I don't know what else to do for them other than to keep pointing out the obvious, right? It's right there, and this is the parallel of what's coming. We see this in the book of Revelations. Now we see it here. This is what they've always taught. This is what they've always said. This is the foundation of the end times, according to that true religion that they believe in, that the purity of, well, I shouldn't say purity because it's not purity, but for them in their mind, the essence of that man-made religion. And that's the myth that Christians have misunderstood. They think this Judaism that is being practiced is the Judaism of the Bible, and it's not. This is a development post the destruction of the temple, right? They no longer had sacrifices. And yes, there were rabbis and Pharisees in the time of Jesus before the destruction of the temple, but by 70 CE forward, they had to create a new religion because the religion they had ceased to exist. And so this is the development of that man-made religion from 70 forward, and these are the results.
That is so important what you just said, for people to realize. That sentence, what you just explained, so important. And before you move on, I want to go back to that little tiny detail that you brought out, where it says that in a Mishnah right there in a Kings by Maimonides, where he says the king can kill you when let's say you were prohibited from leaving your house, but you did leave. He can kill you. And now we are in this COVID-19 mandates, and you said that, doesn't it look like they're preparing us for these Noahide laws? Absolutely.
They're grooming us. It's all grooming.
Absolutely. People need to understand that going back to obey these mandates, well, some people have no choice. Of course, we have no choice when we are forced like this, but they need to understand what is going on here. What is the depth of all of this?
What's behind it?
What's behind this, that they are preparing us for Noahide laws, even by locking us in our houses and making us to obey mandates that make no scientific sense. And it all comes back to also the fact that this is a coronavirus, which is Keter, which is on the top of Sephiroth tree, which that's what puts in motion the entire end times as predicted by the rabbis in Talmud, Zohar, and Kabbalah. This is all of their, this is their theater here that we are going through. You know, they're playing out their own prophecies in their own books. So I just want people to really get all of these details.
Vice President Joe Biden concluded a 3-day visit to Israel this week, aimed at discussing shared regional interests with Israeli leaders. The Vice President began his visit with a meeting with an old friend, former Israeli President Shimon Peres.
We have absolute, total, unvarnished commitment to the security of Israel, and I hope we can make some progress. But there's no better place to start when I show up in Israel than with you, Mr. President. I'm so happy you're looking so well.
The next morning, Vice President Biden, accompanied by his wife Dr. Jill Biden, met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his wife Sarah at the Prime Minister's office in Jerusalem. During his remarks to the media, the Vice President spoke about the special relationship between the United States and Israel.
It's a bond between people, forged a link by successive generations and grounded in an abiding commitment to Israel's security, a bond that can never be broken.
So in chapter 3, we see what the death penalty is when you disobey. But here in chapter 6, we get a little bit more detail, and I'll zoom in for the viewers here into the English here. And please be patient. I know it's a little big of a paragraph, but I'll try to get through it. So this is what happens in chapter 6 when this king offers you the peace offering and conditions to it, what the result will be for these people. And so anybody who thinks that by serving this Antichrist, they got it in, it's even worse off for you. It's just like right now with the Antifa, the BLM, and all that. They think that by getting this particular group of people in power, they will have power. They will be the first ones to go to the guillotine as well. And that's what this chapter is about. So let's see. War is not conducted against anyone in the world until they are first offered peace and refuse it. Whether this is a discretionary war or war of mitzvot.
People should understand by now, this should be crystal clear, that Israel is the single greatest strength America has in the Middle East.
As it says, and then here we go, Deuteronomy 20. When you come close to the city to fight with it, you shall call it to make peace. If they make peace, meaning the Gentiles, the ones who reject this king,
right.
If they make peace and accept, and here's your first reference ever about these Noahide laws, as far as I understand, unless you know of an earlier reference, please tell me. But to tell me that this is a conspiracy, the rabbis don't believe it. The greatest rabbi in Rabbinic Judaism, Maimonides, just told you right here. If they accept the 7 commandments incumbent upon the sons of Noah, Gentiles, none of them are killed, but they must pay us tribute. As it says, and they shall be for you tributary, and they shall serve you, Deuteronomy 20:11. If they propose to accept upon themselves the payment of tribute, but not servitude to us, or they accept servitude but not the tribute, we ignore their proposal until they accept both. It's all or nothing. You submit or not, right?
Look at the servitude of Israel right now.
Yeah.
Look at all the nations and what they're doing. The ones that are coming in, they're all bowing down.
Mm-hmm.
And in many cases, you even find out later that they're accepting the Noahide laws.
Exactly, and then that leads us into the little crux here of the red here. The servitude referred to here is one of disgrace and is demeaning. They are not to raise their head, meaning the Gentiles. They are not to, or these rejectors of the king. They are not to raise their heads up to Israel for any reason. They must be subjugated to us and may never be assigned a position over us. The tribute they must pay shall be in service to the king with their bodies and their money. There's your mark of the beast, and you cannot buy, you cannot sell unless you have given your body in tribute. And then they go on, such as building the walls and strengthening the fortress and the building the royal palace, and it goes on and on and on, right? And so you're giving your body, your money, your mind, everything up to this king on the condition. And so even then, if you accept the 7 Noahide commandments, these current rabbis, like Rabbi Hillel, is lying to you, because even if you take these Noahide laws, you're still under servitude, and it's disgraceful and demeaning. So you don't get a pass by accepting these Noahide laws. And here it is right here, right? Im hishlimu vikiblu sheva mitzvot she nitztavu v'nei Noach. It's right there.
Yes.
There is your B'nai Noach, the laws of Noah. So for these scholars to say, I can never imagine a time of Jewish world domination, you don't need to imagine anymore. It's right here. Maimonides is telling you what is coming via Satan.
This is so important.
Let me point out something very important
Go
right
ahead,
here.
Stephen.
With what Brother Perez is saying, especially about the demeaning part, you don't get a free pass. Rabbi Glick, Yehuda Glick.
Oh, yes, yes.
He actually, Paul, they were on a program together and they were expressing their joy together. And then Paul said, when me and my wife come next year, we should meet up with you and your wife.
Yeah.
And then Yehuda says to Paul, things will be much different then.
Yes, he was saying, well, things will be a lot different, you know.
And we took that as, and me and Yana actually talked about this together. I don't know if we talked about it publicly, but we did talk about it privately, that Paul doesn't realize that he's going to be a servant at that point. If they spare his life and he goes into that system, which is what it appears that he's doing, he will go in as a Noahide, and therefore he will have to forsake his belief in Jesus Christ, and he will become a servant to them. So, and I think this is what Yehuda was referring to, but didn't say to him directly what he was really talking about.
They don't understand that they will be made to give up their faith as they worship Christ. You know, they might keep the name Christian, but it will be it will be watered down, and it will be by what Noahide laws are dictating, that you cannot say Jesus is God, Jesus is divine. You won't be able to do that. No. So they will definitely dictate to them how they're going to worship, what they can do, what they cannot do, you know, what kind of holidays they can have, and what they can celebrate, what they cannot celebrate. They don't realize they're going into servitude and a complete dehumanizing position. And maybe they will wake up later. I don't know, but it might be too late. So they need to really understand what Jews believe, what they teach, you know?
Exactly. And specifically the rabbis, because they're the ones running the system. Again, we definitely want to preface, this is not the little grandma sitting in Shabbat service, right? These are people that are higher ups. They're working with the Luciferian satanic agenda. And I really mean that. I don't mean that in the most conspiratorial way. It's no longer a conspiracy. It's always been real. These guys are dealing with the Ein Sof in Kabbalah, which for me is Satan. Yes. Only Satan would be able to say, I am infinity, Ein Sof, without an end. That is the deception to begin with. And
that's what Christians think, that our God and Jewish God are the same God.
No.
They do not realize that Jews serve totally different God by name Ein Sof.
Yes. Well, there again, you're getting more into the Kabbalistic type of Judaism and Orthodoxy, more of the elite class. I've sat so many times with some of these elite people, or, you know, the high ups that are in there, and they talk openly amongst themselves just about how that Gentiles will become slaves to them.
You know, I would like for people to really look at this, what you have highlighted, and read it several times. so it can sink into reality.
Yes, it's so clear. I don't see how you could read anything other than what's literally there in black and white. You don't have a past because you submit to Rabbi Hillel, Rabbi Israel Ariel, or Yitzhak Shapiro with his messianic stuff, or any other figure. It doesn't matter. You're going down no matter what. And if you're not killed by the Antichrist, God will kill you some way, somehow, in his own anger. He'll figure out a way to get rid. So there's no way out of this. There's literally no way out.
So there's no way out of this. There's literally no way out.
Meaning that, like you explained before with your proofs, they're saying Gentiles are not humans. Just to accept Noahide laws doesn't make you human in their eyes.
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, is that that's the deception. They're thinking these lukewarm Christian or secular people think, oh, well, I'll just submit. They're great people. They're God's chosen people. But read the fine print. You know, I don't mean to sound stereotypical about Jews, but read the contract, read the fine print. You know, you got to read in between the lines. And here are the lines. They're telling you, yeah, we're telling you us up front, come in, join us. But then once the party has started, you're not invited. You know what I mean?
You have a disgraced position, demeaning position. You're still a servant, and you have to obey the laws, and you're still not a human.
Exactly. And so this is so clear, and they know it. Rabbi Hillel knows it. He and the camera, of course, they're going to say politicians and religious people do it all the time. They're not going to tell you this up front, because that would destroy the whole method of their agenda, right? But it's here. But I think, you know better than I do about the occult and all these things. I think it's part of their false religion that they, little by little, they have to put stuff out, right? That's part of their Luciferian thing, that they kind of have to warn or say things prior to it happening.
In a secular life, they are putting it through movies. You know, they do control media and they do control Hollywood. Like yesterday we talked how these religious top elite rabbis are connected to Rothschilds and Rockefellers.
This might shock you, but we have something in common.
Good.
Respect for human life.
Thank you.
Okay? Now, I have 2 comments on my deep respect for human life. Okay? Number 1, and you can comment on my objections. Number 1 and number 2. Okay? Number 1, I'm opposed to the murder of unborn babies being legal. Number 2, I'm opposed to our wasting our military in the Middle East on behalf of Zionist Israel. Thank you.
Okay. All right, well, let me just tell you that Israel is a very, very important ally of the United States, and we are going to protect them 100%. 100%. They've been our most reliable. It's our true friend over there, and we're going to protect Israel 100%. As to number 1, we're with you. Okay, one more. We got to ask one more, because that was a tough question on Israel. That was nasty. Whoa, are we all for Israel, right?
And so if that was not enough, here's another citation. Non-Jews will be slaves, Eruvin 43b, right? And here's the red line. Once the Messiah comes, that's Antichrist for us, right? Once their Messiah comes, all the nations will be subservient to the Jewish people. De Chevan, de Ate Mashiach, Hakol, there's your key word, Hakol, all people, Avadim hen le Israel. You will be Avid, a slave, and here you go, Eved, slave or servant. They're telling you. How clear can it get other than this? I don't know.
They're telling you. How clear can it get other than this? I don't know.
And what's important for people to understand in this last part here, hakol, when you put the hey in front of the word kol,
Yeah,
That's
let me zoom in so you can see it.
that's every single person.
Every single person.
Hakol Vadim, Chen la Yisrael. All right, you will be, every one of you will be a slave to them, to Israel, to the Jewish people. It actually doesn't say Jewish people, but but that's what it means. It's still the same thing.
Yes.
The Jewish people, because when they say La Yisrael, that means
That's
to
how
all the Jewish
they
people.
interpret.
Synonymous, yeah.
Exactly.
For them, it's synonymous. Yes.
So that's very serious. You know,
That's
it's not
a
just
very
saying Kol
serious.
Avadim, it's Hakol Avadim.
Wow. Keep
And
going.
so once you've established this, once you've established the system, the Noahide, they've accepted it, they become your servants. This is what they think. So in a subsection, Mechilta de Rabbi Ishmael, this is what he teaches. Find then that when cattle are driven off by those who feared the word of the Lord, proved to be an impediment to Israel. So in any time a righteous Gentile or a convert to Judaism, if they're an impediment and cause the enemy to see where you're at, this is the response. The best of the Gentiles, kill.
There we go.
Omer tov shegoim hahog.
Yes.
I mean, that is clear as day.
This is serious, brothers and sisters.
Yes, it is.
This is the foundation of their faith.
And,
So
and
when, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
So when you are on a bridge with them and making these friendships and bridges, know this one thing, Brother Louis, that when Christians and Jews make this official bridge, it's never, never two ways. It's always a one way, meaning it's their way or a highway. It's never that Christian can get up and teach something to them. They won't allow Christian to get up and explain their point of view. So when you are on that bridge, it's always one way. It's just one-way submission. It's not really friendship. They call it friendship, but it's always one-way submission. That's what I noticed in these friendships. Now, even back then when we were Zionists and very much in a support of Israel, we had a Facebook with all filled out with 5,000 people. We couldn't even accept any more people. It was called Unconditionally We Support Israel. It was huge. And, you know, this is what I started noticing, Brother Louis, that, well, okay, so we are all these friends and we love the Jewish people and we give them all this honor, but it's, I noticed that it's always this one way. It's always about them. They are in a position of teachers and leaders, and Christians are always these little people just kind of below them and submitting and worried about not to offend and walking on eggshells. Do you understand what I mean?
Yes, and that's because these pastors and people in the church, they have gone to seminaries that are infected with this Schofield type of theology.
Yes.
They don't open their Bibles when they have fellowship. It's woe is me, let me have free therapy. And that's not what ultimately the church is. Yes, there's time for fellowship and to counsel people. But ultimately, right now, we're in the time that we need to get ready to know what's coming. And that's the problem. People are not opening their books. Oh, don't read the book of Revelations. It's very complex. Don't go there. It causes confusion. When a pastor says that, for me, the book of Revelations is one of the easiest books to read. When you have some context, right? When you have some, basic Holy Spirit to guide you, right? And when you see the writing on the wall. And so when you got these guys infiltrated, who the people who infiltrate these Christian seminaries, a lot of the times are rabbis. They hire these rabbis or they hire religious Jews to come in and teach Hebrew in seminary, right? Or to teach, give us a rendition of rabbinic literature. And then that's the little seed or leaven of that comes in and destroys the whole lot. And that's what we're seeing, and that's in the scripture. That's part of the end times. So can I say I'm surprised? No. But can I say that I'm saddened? Yes, because I see that although Christ wins at the end, there's still a little bit left to go before we go home, right? And so, that the human side still says, okay, I got to get ready. I need to at least know what to prepare for.
Yes,
Amen.
and what happened is these Christian pastors and Christian churches have adopted rabbinic interpretations of the prophecy.
This goes back to that method of pardes, pashat, remes, drash, and sod that has infiltrated the. I visited a church recently, 3-point sermon, and I'm like, it's not a 3-point sermon. This is a pardes sermon. They basically copied and pasted the pardes method. Here's your verse. Here's the reading between the lines. This is how you apply it, and here's the secret meaning. Everyone, they keep following that pardes method. And that's not unique to Christianity. That is something that is the rabbis invented. The method that they borrow is called pardes, right? It's an acronym for pashat, which means the verse itself, right? Mm-hmm. Then you have remes, which is this, scholarly application, if you will. A drash is the story, like midrash. How can I turn this into a story for your life, right? And then the sod, right? The 4th step. This secret meaning only I know, and I can tell you because I have a master's degree and triple doctorate. And so it's the same idea that the rabbis do, right? And that method, thank you to Schofield, thank you to the rabbis who taught him, and to Satan who taught them all, that has now infiltrated our evangelical churches. And Baptist churches and charismatic churches and any denomination you want to put under.
They believe they have this adult.
Yeah, it's the 98% of churches in America, brother.
The authority has been taken from God and given to the pastors. It's the same method I just showed you from the beginning, only now the pastors are the Pharisees and the rabbis. It's become church incorporated. I must go to a seminary, get in debt, get into student loans, and get into usury. You must hire me and pay me $60,000, $70,000 a year for 1 day of work a week, and you're going to like it, and you're going to pay your tithings, and you're going to be quiet. That's the rabbis.
Yes.
That is church incorporated. We're done with that. We're past that point. Now, I'm not suggesting to forsake the assembly, but show me an assembly not worth forsaking. That's the crux of the problem there.
There you go. Exactly. There you go, brother. That's exactly.
But anyway, I can go on my soapbox there and keep going on. But we only have 2 more slides. And so in summary, let's review. So the first step was take authority from God. Step number 2, establish man-made authority. And step number 3, once that I'm able to convince people that I have authority, I dehumanize and make anything that's not Jewish animalistic, right? Yes. Which leads us to the very end, right? We make the Gentiles servants. We've gotten rid of the best of the Gentiles, right? According to Rabbi Shimon.
America's commitment to Israel is absolutely unshakable. It is unquestionable.
Is that a Trump yarmulke? Oh, it's a Trump yarmulke. Wow, I like it. Can I have that, Austin? I want that. Across our country, Jewish Americans strengthen, sustain, and inspire our nation. As president, I will always celebrate and honor the Jewish people, and I will always stand with our treasured friend and ally, the State of Israel. That I can tell you.
And then what leads us into the most saddest part, the children. Teachings regarding children, rabbinic pedophilia.
Rabbinic pedophilia.
So once all the good people are gone or enslaved, the children have nobody to protect them.
So once all the good people are gone or enslaved, the children have nobody to protect them.
And this is what they think about children. This is, if there are children watching now, please send them away, because this is not good for those kids that are watching at all. Rabbinic pedophilia, Sanhedrin 54b. Let's see. The Gemara asks, what does it mean that the Torah does not deem a younger boy to be like an older boy? Rav says it means that the Torah does not deem the intercourse of one who is less than 9 years old. What? The intercourse of somebody that is less than, how is that even a concept or a question?
That's right.
Right? The intercourse of somebody that is less than 9 years old to be like the intercourse of one who is at least 9 years old. I don't care what time period you're in. How was this ever kosher? I don't know, right? And then he goes on to say, and Shmuel says, the Torah does not deem the intercourse of a child who is less than 3 years old to be like that of one who is 3 years old. So not only is it 9 years old, you can have sex with a child that is 3 and less than 3 years old. Can you imagine having sex as a man with a child, male or female, because there is no distinction at this level, at this age, and they're 1, 2 years old, a little baby. This is what you see now in this Luciferian satanic stuff, and it's coming out. This year alone, 2020, has revealed so much about what's going on behind the scenes, but it goes back to this. It's not nothing new under the sun. Check out this last citation that we have here in Ketubot 11b. Rabbah said that this is what the Mishnah is saying. An adult man who engaged in intercourse with a minor girl less than 3 years old has done nothing, as intercourse with the girl less than 3 years old is tantamount to poking a finger into the eye. My goodness. Oh, wow. And a young boy who engaged in intercourse with an adult woman renders her as one whose hymen was ruptured by wood. The fact that they're even having this discussion, I challenge any rabbi, any Christian scholar to come on and look me straight in the face and attempt to justify or put this away.
But you know, the thing is, Brother Perez, these are the type things that even Michael Brown tries to defend. He tries to say that, well, it's not really what they're implying. Well, you know, the thing is that I have brought out many times on these issues is I've said to people, if for no other reason they're justifying it so that they don't get put to death. Like, for example, when they talk about it in a different, there's another one where they speak about it, and they're, you know, it's basically it's because you're dealing with homosexuality and on one particular case because of it being a boy. But then they justify it to say, well, if he's under the age of 9 years old, he's not considered a man to begin with, so therefore he's not committed such an act. But it's the mere fact that they would find a way to justify that they didn't commit homosexuality because the boy is at a certain age, so he's not really a man, you know. And the same thing when you're dealing with little girls and stuff. I mean, to justify the acts and to lighten it, but by the way, and so people might need to know this as well, this is only for Jewish people, though. It'd be different if you're a Gentile.
Well, again, if you're a Gentile, it's all game is fair because you're not human anyway.
Yeah, that's right. That's why this is actually put out there, and that's what a lot of people don't realize. It's just like when we read. Oh gosh, I forget now. I'll skip it for now. But anyway.
Yes. Well, the reason they put it in there, brother, is because they are giving themselves a way out, just in case one of them is so perverted, you know, among these rabbis, that they're giving themselves a way out.
That's the point.
They always want to find like loopholes in their law.
Oh, of course. I mean, a liar knows a liar. I was taught by the best liars in the world, right? The rabbis. And so I've heard all their arguments. Behind the scenes, they've always said, this is true, this is word of God, and we can apply this. So anyone to tell me, oh, well, the rabbis I study with, you know, they would never agree to this. They're lying to you.
They're lying to you.
I've sat with rabbis, Sephardic, Ashkenaz, Ethiopian, you name it, any culture, any background of Jew, and they're looking me in the straight face and telling me, yes, this will apply in the time that King Messiah comes.
Right. Yes.
So anybody that says the opposite, they're lying to you. I can assure you by my own testimony, they're lying to you.
They're lying to you.
Yes.
It shows how perverted this so-called Messiah figure is going to be. It could only be Satan, because only in the mind of Satan himself could he be stooped so low to defile a little baby.
Today, we thank God for the Jewish people whose love and loyalty, brilliance and bravery, resilience and resolve, spirit and strength bless America and the world. Before I sign the executive order, I'd like to ask Oscar to say a few words, and Jonathan will light the menorah. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Yeah, that tells you they're serving Ein Sof, which is Satan himself.
Yes. And so there you go. This is a quick synopsis of what you can see backed by the literature in the context. And if anybody says, no, he's eisegeting, he's reading stuff into it, Please come on. I mean, I won't even debate you. I just want to be surprised and see if you would even justify any of these things. Because at that point, that if you justify it to any centimeter of anything that is positive about this thing, you're in on it. I'm sorry.
That's right.
In my mind, you're in on it if you justify anything that I showed you today.
You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in. Right? Right?
I am the victim no longer. I found the victor and he is much stronger than any doubt, any need, any worry inside. He's resurrected in me. Christ is alive. Oh, Christ is alive. He's alive in me. Resurrected in power, now he's what you see. Christ in me. When you get the revelation, everything will change. When you get this revelation, nothing stays the same. When you get the revelation, everything will change. Oh, I am the victim no longer. I found the victor and he is much stronger than any doubt, any need, any worry inside. He's resurrected in me. Christ is alive. Christ in me. When you get the revelation, everything will change. When you get this revelation, nothing stays the same. When you get the revelation, everything will change.